Hi, I'm Libby Lynch, and I'm honored to teach AP Studio Art 2D Design for Niswonger. Last summer, I was asked to serve as a reader for the college board. I have been tasked with sharing a little information with you all. What are the College Board readers looking for in an AP Studio Art and Design portfolio? Well, I am so glad you asked. To start off with, let me set the stage. Here is a photo of the room set up for the reading, and it's a room full of a lot of tables and a lot of computers and a lot of people. As we arrived, we were given an introduction to the reading process and a schedule for each day. Our day started at 8 a.m. and at 10 to 10:15, we take a required break. Then we read some more. From 12 to 1, we have lunch. Most of us kind of step out, take a walk, or go get lunch somewhere else. They do have a cafeteria, but it's kind of nice to take a break from the room for just a little while and to get outside if the weather is okay. Then we read again. We have a second mandatory break from 3 to 3:15. We finish reading, and the day ends at 5 o'clock. However, on several days, we were asked to arrive early and/or stay late. The schedule is tough. In fact, it's pretty grueling. We are allowed to set up our station, our workstation, any way we want to. Here is my little workstation. I did wind up setting up a standing station for part of the time. You can bring snacks, drinks, anything that it takes to help you stay alert and comfortable. Then, on day one, we were thoroughly trained on using the rubric to evaluate the portfolios. And if I can pass on any one single bit of wisdom about the reading for AP, any AP in fact, it would be to download the current rubric, print it, look at your work through the lens of the rubric. A few other things to share about the training process before I get into the actual reading advice. These things may put you at ease about the validity of the process of grading works of art. Readers are sort of tested before being turned loose to read and grade portfolios. This process is repeated every year, even for returning readers. This testing is done with validity samples. These samples are clear, pre-scored responses. Then periodically, sample portfolios are inserted into the reading and used to monitor the reader's accuracy. This ensures consistency throughout the process. Back reading or quality control is where the table leader may change a score to keep the scoring consistent. If this is done, the leader will provide written feedback to the original reader, noting why this was done. Finally, all portfolios are typically read by 4 to 7 highly qualified arts educators. The sustained investigation will be read by at least 2 separate readers. Quality is reviewed by 3 separate readers. If there is a discrepancy or a wide gap in the scores, portfolios are forwarded to the AP leaders for further review. After this intense training with rubric in hand, scoring of the sustained investigation portion of the portfolio begins. This section takes considerably longer to read than the selected works does. All 3 portfolios are looking for essentially the same thing: a portfolio that exhibits, and listen to me clearly, a preponderance of evidence that the portfolio identifies an inquiry, that it clearly illustrates practice, experimentation, and revision, that the materials, processes, and ideas are evident, that there is visual evidence of good and advanced 2D, 3D, or drawing skills. Synthesis, however, is the key for your selected works. In order to receive a score of 5 for selected works, students must identify what materials they are using, how they are using them, and why they are using them. How do the materials relate to the ideas? So you have an opportunity to share that information in the written portion of the selected works, which is that information that you entered that has the size, the media, description. Be as clear and concise as you can. You don't have to put proper grammar in that part. Really, you can bullet stuff or put commas between stuff. Keep it simple. A very important note, a portfolio does not have to walk on water to get a 3 to a 5 score. Personal preference in art styles, etc., do not come into play when the rubric is being followed. So again, a portfolio does not have to walk on water in order to receive a score of 3, 4, or 5 even. But it must address the concerns that are being asked, that the students are being graded on in the rubric. The key scoring components and weighting, so the sustained investigation portion of your portfolio, and this is why it takes longer, is weighted 60% of your grade. This evaluates your ability to conduct a sustained investigation, in-depth inquiry through 15 images and your written evidence. The two things must go together. I will let you know that most of the readers tended to glance through like a gallery view of the images, then they would read the sustained investigation, then they would slowly, not slowly, but they would click through the 15 images. And I mean, we are trained during the first day to see things quick. You can see it really quick. It's not like you have time to really study a work of art. So your presentation has to be clear. If you include writing in a collage image, which you can do a little bit, and that's a way to get a little extra information to the readers, keep it simple, keep it concise. Don't add paragraphs there because nobody is going to have time to read it. The selected works count 40% of your portfolio, and this evaluates your 5 best pieces for skillful synthesis of, again, materials, processes, and ideas. So selected works is 40%, and synthesis, again, that word, synthesis of materials, processes, and ideas. A final score of 1 to 5 represents a combination of these sections, with a 3 to 5 generally being considered a passing score. Now, let's look in depth at how we score using the rubric. We're going to practice a little bit. When applying the rubric, there were a couple of general scoring notes that we were asked to pay attention to. The score for each row should be considered independently from other rows. We were to award the score for that row based solely on criteria indicated according to the preponderance of evidence. There is a helpful vocabulary list that students really need to look over prior to turning in their work because it explains a lot of things in the rubric. Now, for the rubric, we first were guided to look at written evidence. This is first. And pay attention to the decision rules and scoring notes that are the bottom portion of row A, because if the written evidence identifies an inquiry by describing discovery and exploration, and a question or topic that merely identifies a theme or topic is not, and I repeat, not an inquiry. If it does, it moves on to 2, or possibility of 2. If it does not, it can only receive a 1. Then, if the portfolio is at the 2 level, then does that portfolio have visual evidence demonstrating the inquiry? If not, it goes back to a 1. If it does, it can move on to a 3. Then at the 3 level, does the inquiry guide the development of the sustained investigation? If it does, then it's awarded 3 points. If not, it goes back to a 2. For row B, visual evidence first. Is there visual evidence of practice, experimentation, and revision? If there is visual evidence of practice, experimentation, and revision, then the portfolio is eligible to move on to a score point of 2. Does the written evidence of practice, experimentation, and revision relate to the sustained investigation? If it doesn't, then it goes back to a 1. If it does, then they're moving on to a possibility of a score point of 3. Then, does the visual evidence of practice, experimentation, and revision demonstrate development of the sustained investigation? And does the written evidence describe ways that the sustained investigation developed through practice, experimentation, and revision? If it doesn't, then that portfolio is awarded a 2 for this portion. If it does, then it's awarded a 3. So pay attention to the words. In column B, or row B, column 2, visual and written evidence, experimentation and revision. And then in column 3, demonstrates development of the sustained investigation. So row C addresses materials, processes, and ideas. These should be related. There should be a coalescence or synthesis of the materials, processes, and ideas. If there is visual evidence of relationships among the materials, processes, and ideas, the portfolio receives a 1 and moves on to the possibility of a score of 2. Do the visual relationships among the materials, processes, and ideas demonstrate synthesis? If yes, the portfolio gets a 3. If not, it stays at a 2. Row D addresses the skills, 2D, 3D, or drawing skills. If the portfolio has visual evidence, including some works with good or proficient skills, then the portfolio receives a 1. If the portfolio has moderate and good or adequate drawing skills, the portfolio gets a 2. If the portfolio does have visual evidence across all works, including a range of good and advanced skills, then the portfolio goes on to get a 3. Now, let's move on to the selected works portion of the rubric. First, we were guided to look at written evidence. If the written evidence did not identify materials, processes, and ideas, then the portfolio is only eligible for score points 1 and 2. If the written evidence identifies materials, processes, and ideas, the portfolio is eligible for all 5 score points. We reviewed the application of drawing skills or design skills or 2D, 3D design skills to determine the accomplishment level. If there aren't any, it's present, it's a 1. If the portfolio demonstrates emerging or undeveloped skills, then it's a 2. If it's adequate, it's a 3. If it's proficient, it's a 4, and if it's highly developed, it's a 5. Then we look at we are asked to read the written evidence and evaluate the visual relationships among the materials, processes, and ideas. Back to synthesis. This is a holistic rubric. The materials, processes, and ideas look at the what, materials, the how, the processes, and the ideas, the why. These 3 things must be identified to get a possible score point of 5. The what, the how, and the why. Just a couple of terms that I really want you to pay attention to in the AP Art and Design rubric terminology. For 2D art and design skills, 2D art and design skills address points, lines, shapes, planes, layers, form, space, texture, color, value, opacity, transparency, and time. And then 3D design skills really concentrate on the volume, the mass, occupied and unoccupied space both. So this could be the space around the form. It's as important as the form. But if you look about a third of the way down, preponderance. We keep coming back to this word, preponderance of evidence. Preponderance is more than half. More than half of the portfolio exhibits evidence of strong drawing skills, of synthesis. Synthesis is coalescence or integration of materials, processes, and ideas. So now we're going to take just a minute to look through a portfolio that scored at the lower end of the scoring. Just look at the work. So this portfolio was on the weaker end of the scoring. The written evidence does not identify an inquiry, so this response earns a score of 1 because the written evidence does not identify an inquiry. Although it refers to the people who fight for us, we don't see it. The statement does not present any questioning to guide exploration or discovery. Instead, the response reflects a broad theme rather than an inquiry-driven investigation. Additionally, there is no consistent visual evidence of an inquiry across the 15 images. For example, in image 11, the eagle and the word divide lack a clear connection to the stated focus. In image 13, the painting of a gavel and bass does not demonstrate or develop the idea of unseen contributors or question their roles. The written and visual components do not establish or explore a guiding inquiry. This portfolio earned a score of 1 because the written evidence did not identify an inquiry and the visual evidence did not demonstrate one. The response presents a broad theme without clear questioning or sustained investigation. So now let's look at a sustained investigation and a full portfolio, in fact, that received a score of 5. Here is the written evidence for the sustained investigation. Take just a moment to read that before looking at the images. Feel free to pause the video. So this portfolio that you just looked at received a high score of 3 for every part of their portfolio. In the inquiry, row A, written evidence identifies an inquiry, and visual evidence demonstrates the inquiry, and the inquiry guides the development of the sustained investigation. The written evidence established a clear and specific inquiry. Visual evidence reinforced that inquiry through emotionally resonant compositions. The consistent exploration of this tension across the images shows that the inquiry effectively guided the development of the sustained investigation. In row B, practice, experimentation, and revision, visual evidence was there, and it demonstrated development of the sustained investigation. Image 2 also shows the development where traditional oil and colored pencil techniques evolved through digital manipulation in Procreate, and written evidence describes how the investigation developed through practice, experimentation, and revision. In row C, materials, processes, and ideas, the visual relationships among materials, processes, and ideas was evident and demonstrated synthesis. That word again, synthesis. Then, in row D, 2D art and design skills, there was visual evidence of both good and advanced two-dimensional skills. Now, take a look at images from the selected works portion of the same portfolio. All except one of the images are from the sustained investigation. This is typical of a selected works portion for a portfolio. This section also received high scores of 3 for all sections of the portfolio. In the inquiry, row A, they identified an inquiry, and visual evidence demonstrated that inquiry, and the inquiry guided the development of the sustained investigation. In row B, there was evidence of practice, experimentation, and revision. This portfolio excelled on every level. Last summer, we read 48,790 2D design portfolios, 10,333 3D design portfolios, and 23,385 drawing portfolios for a total of 82,508 portfolios. You can imagine how this was done in just over a week. How quick we have to read the portfolios. How important it is for you to be clear and concise with the information that you present to the readers. Now, I would like to introduce you to my friend Janet Laws, who I was roommates with for the reading last summer and plan to room with again this summer. Janet and I have known each other several years and have worked together on a lot of different art education projects. And I thought it might be interesting to hear from not just me as an AP reader, but to let Janet and I bounce some questions off each other so you can see from the perspective of someone, not just me. And one, hi. So now I'm at my own school here in Humboldt, Tennessee, my on-campus school. And I asked my good friend Janet to join me today for a little conversation so you can get some insight from not just me on the AP reading, but from my friend Janet, who has done it longer than I have. So Janet Laws teaches at Brentwood High School, right?
Brentwood Academy
Brentwood Academy.
in Brentwood, Tennessee.
In Brentwood, Tennessee. And we have known each other, I don't know. How long have we known each other?
Long time. 20 years?
Yeah, probably.
Probably.
And last summer was my first time as a reader. Janet had been reading for several years. How many years were you a reader?
This will be my 6th year. So
Okay.
just a few more than you, but
That's
um,
several more.
yeah.
But anyway, she was telling me about it and said, "You ought to do the reading." And so last summer I had an opportunity to go, and we were roommates, and it was an amazing experience. But I just wanted to, first of all, Janet, do you want to say anything before I ask you a couple of questions?
Oh no, just a little about me. This is my 27th year teaching. I've always done middle school, high school, have only been teaching AP for about 9 years. And you have to be teaching it for a few years before they let you read. But as soon as I had an opportunity, I decided to be a reader because I think you learn so much more from being in it and just figuring out what the whole thing's about. So we kept talking about they being the readers, are looking for something. Now, Libby and I know kind of firsthand what we're looking for as readers. So,
And that's so true. And I have been teaching AP for almost 30 years now, a
wow.
long time. And I was with the portfolio when it was a different format.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to even talk about that on this in this video because I don't want to confuse anybody. But having become a reader, I mean, man, it totally transforms how you inform your own students, at least
Right.
in my opinion, it does. So, how long? Yeah, well, you've already answered the first question that I had for you. You've been reading the portfolios. This will be your sixth year.
Yes.
And how would you say that reading the portfolios, serving as a readers, has informed how you teach?
Okay, I think that's a great question. The first thing I think is the importance of the rubric. Like anything AP, whether it's, a push or anything, AP has a formula and they are giving us the formula. And the more you use it, the more your students understand it, the higher they can score because they're doing what they're asked to be doing. I know that until I became a reader, I looked at the rubric. I didn't really pay much attention to it. The first summer that I was there, all the other teachers that were saying, "Oh yeah, we use it all the time. That's how I grade. That's how I." And I was like, "Oh, okay. There's one thing I need to do to help make my kids have a stronger opportunity." So the importance of the rubric. I give them the rubric the first day. We are constantly referring to it. When we are doing critiques, we look at the rubric and we grade, some things based on the rubric.
And something that I've already told the students earlier in this video was that the portfolio, and they said this literally in these words, the portfolio does not have to walk on water in
No,
order to receive a 3, 4, or 5 score.
right,
It has to address the parts of the rubric. And that's what I have already mentioned to them is the importance of looking at their own work through the
right,
lens of that rubric.
right.
Yeah. Okay. So, what tips would you give a student for what order they should put their work in? Does it need to be done, uploaded in chronological order, or how? What do you tell your own students as far as uploading the work?
I think sometimes you have to look at everything. At this time of year, we're starting to see more work, so we can kind of start to tell our story. Um, and I think you have to do whatever tells your story the best. Um, First of all, the most important thing is, do you have an inquiry? And are you telling us the inquiry? Like, is there an inquiry or is it just a theme of pretty art? You have to have an inquiry. And then it's funny, as a reader, every year they have tweaked the rubrics just a little bit by instead of having an and or, now it's all and, or, that last summer, I struggled a little because not only did you have to have an inquiry, but it had to show discovery. And so that to me is a hard thing. So if your students can show it in their artwork, but tell us in the writing, it makes it so much easier to grade. I can give you credit if I understand what you're doing and why. And So,
Something, and I tell my students to do this, and I don't know how you feel about it, but I did see it in some of the portfolios when we were doing the reading. But the collage images that show the process of what they're doing, incorporating and you don't want to do too much because we don't, as readers, we don't have time to read a lot
right.
in those images, but maybe some bullets of information about what's been
Mhm.
done, 1, 2, 3, or whatever. How do you feel about those images included as part of the SI portion of the portfolio?
I think that's a great way for to show not only the readers but other people looking at your portfolio what you've done and how you've grown and changed. I know that I was at a thing the other night and they were talking about composite images, which is what we were talking about. And they said if they used to, they had started to see people putting paragraphs. I need more space to talk. No, you don't. So if you are using too many words, you need to redo your composite because what the composites allow is they help to make the invisible of what you're doing more visible by showing the process. I did this, then I changed it to here, and then I added this, and that's how I revised it. So you can show that in one slide,
Yeah.
but you want to make the images stand out for themselves and maybe have arrows or maybe have, a bullet point, but you definitely do not want to have a lot of writing because I feel like I've heard this year they're actually going to tell us don't read the writing in the composites. If it's a big paragraph like that.
Yeah.
If it's just a bullet point,
Like a title.
a title or a
Yeah.
bullet or here and then I did this, then this, so they were saying arrows are good or
Right. Do
mhm,
do your SI written evidence in a Word document and don't even worry about the length.
right,
And then go back and make it concise. Put
right.
it back down.
And edit it and keep in I know a lot of times we read a lot of things. Well, the reason I did this essay was because when I was 6, I did this, and they go on for like half of the sentences telling us that that's too much why.
Right.
So even though you think as an artist that's important, if you can narrow it down to one sentence, that's going to be a lot more effective. Make the invisible visible.
Ooh, I
What
like
is
that.
your why? What are you trying to say? Because that's what is important. You're the artist and you want us to understand what you're saying. And so,
All right. So, what kind of things did some of the students, the portfolios that you read last summer or even the summer before that, but what are some things that some of the students do that make it super helpful when you read the portfolio?
okay, super helpful. Um, Again, I think having a clear point of view with what you're doing. I think it's really helpful if you lay everything out. If you've done something that you don't need, don't include it. You could put it in selected works if you really like it. Or sometimes I've even seen people zoom in on one piece to add an extra piece. And in that piece, that tells you more what they were wanting to say. So I think sometimes that helps. Um, the main thing we keep going back to is the inquiry. And we see, as readers, we see a lot of different pieces, and they try to trick us sometimes, like by showing us things. You're like, oh, yeah, that's really good portfolio. And then you're like, wait a minute. This is even the prettiest portfolios I've ever seen. They didn't have an inquiry. It was just a theme of beautiful flowers in a field or whatever. And so you don't score well because of that, because you have to have that inquiry. So that's my biggest, tip is make sure what you're saying is an inquiry. And your inquiry can be anything. Assume that people looking at it understand what you're doing. You might need to give us a little more information. I have a student this year who is designing a video game,
Hmm.
and her biggest challenge is, first of all, like I don't understand what she's doing. She's like, well, this is how this video game type style works. And I'm like, but I don't understand it. I'm with you every day. So you're going to have to explain why you're doing this. And then you can't just give me 10 beautiful slides. You have to tie it all together as a process. So remember that process is so important too. We want to know what you did to get to this point of this finished portfolio and how you did
Well,
it and why.
that's where some of those composite pictures
Yes.
they come into play.
Hmm.
How at the and how many of the composites do you think appear? How many completed pieces do you feel like, as a reader, you are looking for? Like, sometimes I'll look at a portfolio and it's like, they didn't really have enough, and they've just put stuff in there to fill space. Um, in my opinion, those pieces that are not complete, that are process pieces, really need to inform what's happening.
Right. I agree. I agree. That's such a big debate because I remember seeing one piece, I think it was in my AP training, where the person did one piece, one finished piece, but it was a 24-foot by 10-foot mural. And it was all in charcoal, and they burned the tree to make the charcoal. I mean, so they did all of that stuff, and that was all shown to you throughout the thing, and they did different parts of this giant piece. Now, I think that's more of an anomaly.
I think so too.
I think I try to get my students to do 9 or 10 pieces and then have 5 or 6 process or um it just depends on what they're doing.
Okay,
Last
was there anything that has stood out as something that students should not do, that they really shouldn't do when uploading their work, or the order of their, is there something that has just stood out as something they shouldn't do?
The biggest thing that I see that people, teachers especially, look at is, and it's this whole appropriation versus copying. Last year, I probably wouldn't even let this child even bring anything in that resembled at all the Last Supper. But there is a big understanding, I guess, from the people who we learn from who are reading, if they have taken the original artwork and put their own voice into it and changed it enough that it's now representing their own voice, then it's okay. And it's actually good. It's a good thing. So that's one thing. Be careful that if you're using, I had a student a few years ago who was doing a thing about music, and Michael Jackson is her favorite person. So we went back and back and back, and I'm like, you cannot have a painting of Michael Jackson. You just can't do it. And so she ended up changing it. She's like, well, this doesn't really look like Michael Jackson. And I'm like, well, it still does to me, but other people it didn't. But what she ended up doing was she had been in a museum and seen frames and stuff. And so she made this musician a bunch of time, one time, and then another painting a bunch of times, and had some things that looked like old phone cords. And it was about communicating ideas, and totally changed the idea. You didn't see, it was just whoever this singer was talking to all these people. It wasn't just Michael Jackson. So big thing, don't get into trouble by just sticking a painting, like doing a painting of Michael Jackson and changing the background to purple and green stripes or something. That's the big thing. Um, and then in citing references, I know a lot of people use references. Um, you don't have to cite the actual Google links or anything.
Bartolo.
Barcode, yeah, but you do need to give credit if something was inspired by, a comic strip hero or something. You need to say that, and you can give as much information as you have. But
About if they get inspiration for a composition from Pinterest.
mhm. I try to leave the word Pinterest off of my portfolios. I just think, I know we all do it as artists, but there are some people who read that just look at that. So you could say, online sources. And then if you wanted to say, and, a lot of times I say Google, Google. I mean, Google's a lot bigger. Pinterest tends to have be like a
Mm,
scrapbook. It just doesn't seem, but all art, we're all of us artists are looking for
Well, and
ideas.
And you can get some great ideas from
Right.
Pinterest. The
You
problem
can.
is, I think when students get an idea from Pinterest and then don't just go beyond the idea, they don't,
Right.
there's not enough of their own voice in it.
And if you got an idea from Pinterest and you totally changed it and you wanted to have that on there, you could do it in two different, like in a composite and show that you got this was the inspiration and here's what I came up with. And then
Yeah.
you see again that revision, that voice. So in that case, I would probably say that. Otherwise,
So if you
I
put the Pinterest image in your composite, how do you cite that? I mean,
I think,
I don't know. I think if you just put the image in there and you
right.
say image from Pinterest,
Yeah, I think that's probably fine.
inspiration, you
Right.
could
I
even
think you
pick
could just say inspiration. Yeah. And sometime, whenever you can, if you need a picture of a rose, go out, to a garden
take a
center
picture.
or go to Walmart, yeah, into their garden center and take pictures and use those in your composites as well as maybe an inspiration from Pinterest or from Google or whatever. Because that again shows you're not just looking at something and copying it or or reacting to it and then creating art. You're thinking about a bigger picture.
Or if
Yes.
you're doing figure drawing, or
Yes.
if you're doing animation, anime characters, which
Right.
I'm not a huge fan of, but there were some really strong portfolios that had
Right.
anime characters in them, but take reference photos or
Mhm.
use your own, draw from somebody, even better.
Right. And
Yeah.
I would say I agree. I think there again, there is a bias in some art teachers, not, that anime is not art. Well, it's teaching half of the world how to draw. And so anything that, that would be like saying Bob
Half of the
Ross.
world figure structure too.
Right. And I think the stronger, if you are someone who loves animes or cartoons, try to make it as original as you can. Also, build your values. Build your values in your characters, in your backgrounds.
Well,
Um,
and in your inquiry too, because
mhm,
one of my students this year is doing a digital portfolio, and the characters to me look like anime characters.
mhm.
Her investigation is revolving around kind of an apocalyptic world, and
Okay.
it's really cool. So even though the characters have that style to them, it's her
Right.
own body of work, which as a reader, I would enjoy looking at. And
Right.
uh,
And one thing I do to protect the student and myself from them saying, well, this is not their work, I always run all of my pieces through Tin Eye. I don't know if you're aware of that. It's a Google thing. It's a reverse thing. So if you take a picture and upload it to Tin Eye, it will show you either photos of something that looks like it or similar, or it will say, we've searched, millions of things and we can't find anything like this.
okay.
So if you see something like I just do that, even though if I've seen somebody for 3 weeks work on a piece in class, I still run it everything through there so that there's no question that they've
Well,
gotten
and
this from somewhere else.
on the just a minute ago is that it doesn't appear that the portfolio is fluffed.
Right,
It looks like that the composite images, the collage images, are informative, that they
right.
give you some information about the processes that you've used, about the materials that you've used, especially if you're using some kind of unusual materials or processes. I had one student this year who's incorporated some quilting into one
Oh,
of her
nice.
pieces, and she's got some collage painting stuff on top of the quilt. Um, the thought process that she's gone to that she couldn't show it without, I mean,
Right.
the finished piece just doesn't mean as much unless you see the process. So
Hmm.
to me, I prefer as a teacher to have 9 to 10 at least finished pieces.
I
More
agree.
makes me happier.
Right.
9 to 10 finished pieces. Um, in the past, I even required my students to have 15 total finished pieces. And if they did the process images, they were done off to the side and the finished piece was on
Okay.
the side.
Right. And that's
Um,
good.
but after being a reader, that's one thing I learned. You don't
Yeah.
have to have 15 complete
Right.
pieces.
And sometimes through the process, and sometimes you don't have that because through the process of creating, your idea takes a big turn. And
Hmm.
all of a sudden, you're on a new path. And maybe what you started out with doesn't work at all. So,
Right. I did want to ask, let's see, okay, so the written portion and the 15 images are both the SI. I mean,
yes,
they both make up the SI.
yes.
So as a reader, how did you open up? Now, what I did was I look at a gallery view and get kind of an overall idea of the 15 images and see if the images tell me what the SI is, the
Mhm.
investigation. And then I read the written evidence, and then I clicked through the images. How did you do that?
Um, I feel like to let people know, we sit at the computer from 9 in the morning till 5, looking at portfolios, portfolio after portfolio. So some of the times I do that, and some of the times I start with the writing. I think it depends on just how my brain wants to. Or sometimes you can look at the 15 images and be really, ooh, I want to see what this is about. And so
Hmm.
I just jump in like that. So I kind of do the same thing where I get a preview of what I'm looking at, read about it, and then go delve a little deeper.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, and even still, we don't spend a whole, and unfortunately, you all put so much work into your portfolios. We don't spend a ton of time on them. Some of them you want to, some of them you just want to sit and be like, oh, what a
Wow.
great
Yeah.
idea. This is fabulous, and so, but we don't get to spend that much time as much as
No.
we'd like,
And
but
that's what I've told my students. I mean, we don't have much time. We are
Mhm.
trained to look at it fast and, you know, be able to score it quickly, but they've got to be clear with what they're doing. Otherwise,
Right.
we're going to miss it. So that's why
Right.
it's very important to be concise and clear with what you're doing.
Yes, and you can also tell when something is just thrown together.
Hmm.
Especially in photography portfolios, you can tell if it was all done in one night. So and you're not going to probably score that as high as you would something that took a lot of time and thought and preparation.
Hmm.
Especially in photography portfolios, you can tell if it was all done in one night. So and you're not going to probably score that as high as you would something that took a lot of time and thought and preparation. Um, I know with my students, we are done completing. I don't know the exact day, but it's early April. They're done, like any physical work. And they're
Right.
like, "Well, what are we going to do the rest of the time?" And I'm like, "Polish it. Think of it
Yes.
like it's an art show and you are going to be, presenting an art show. And you want everybody to come and buy your art. Well, you don't want to wait till the night before and have wet paint on your paintings. You want to have, it all set up. You want to know what piece in your mind is going where, and you want to take that same care because you want to tell your story and you know the way to tell it the best. So, do it and then also once your story is there and I like to have my images uploaded before they do their final edits for writing because then you can't really tell your 600 character story till it's all in one piece. Um, and there will be some tweaks and some, rearranging. So, but I like to give them a good 2 to 3 weeks before the deadline. And then well, it's part of my school. My school wants the AP portfolios up before the on-campus AP exams start just because that's how they've always done it. And I stick to that because even though the AP deadline might say a certain date, it's always better to turn it in early.
Yeah.
From what I understand, the closer you get to the deadline, the harder it is to get into the computer and the
It
more
is.
glitches. And
Yeah.
so that just being prepared is really important in this process, I think.
Yeah, I agree. We actually have our course ends, uh, I want to say early April,
Oh,
early.
early. Okay, wow. Then you'll be in good shape. Yeah, you'll be in
So
good.
they should be finished with their work. We may have a few that are not, but most of them will be finishing up.
Yeah.
Um, let's see, anything else? Oh, we haven't really talked about selected works.
Oh, yes, I know.
That part of the portfolio, I mean, they wait until, and do they always wait until later in the reading to start the selected works?
Typically, yes, because
It-
it's smaller
And it goes
and
faster.
it goes faster. And in the old days, like the old days, I only had this happen 2 years, the first 2 years that I did it, you had to mail your selected works pieces to
Yeah,
the AP site.
right,
And what they did is they had a long, gosh, table with artwork on it, and you snaked up one side and down the other. And we
right.
had a little thing button in our hand, and you pushed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, you literally walked and pushed.
So
You
was the percentage of the score the same when you did it that way?
I think so. And I thought this seemed strange as an art teacher, but some people in their selected works maybe put a sketch or a composite, like a process piece.
Okay.
And it doesn't work very well in your selected works
No, that's what
because,
I've told my students.
yeah,
I had one guy that was just insistent that I want to leave the sketch in there because I like the sketch. And I said, well, take the sketch and turn it into a finished piece.
exactly,
And
exactly.
so I'm hoping he's going to watch this video and hear somebody, not just me, saying
Right.
that.
And the selected works is worth 40% of your grade.
Right.
So that's the other thing. I mean, we all talk about SI, SI, SI all year, but the
Mhm.
selected works really is just as important,
Yeah.
because and then the writing for that is the same too. They in there you add the little space about the idea. You have your idea, you have the different things that you can say. So again, use those things well. It's, I was going to tell you this, especially with digital pieces, don't just say Procreate and leave it at that. What brushes did you use? Did you alter backgrounds to create different moods? Did you try different brushes? You could put that in your 100 characters. So if you just do Procreate and then cut and paste Procreate into everything, you're leaving points on the table.
Right.
And it's the same if you write acrylic on canvas, on everything, because, we can tell, if you did something interesting, if you used spices to create a background. I mean, that's something that is important because it's like, oh, wow, that's spice. It's not
Yeah.
just paint. Um, and or if you do stitching, for some reason, AP loves stitching. So if you can add stitching, I mean, anything you can add to a piece to show a little bit further, but it has to make sense. It has to make sense
And
within your,
especially for those selected works, it has
right.
to be, and I've told my students this, the very best of your best work.
Right.
Mm.
So make sure that everything is cropped very cleanly and really up close. Like we don't want to see your studio behind the painting. We
Or
want
a
to see,
spiral bound on a sketch
right, right. Or, if you spilled your
or
coffee
your
on your
hands.
sketch, your hands,
Your
if
hands
you
holding
spilled
it
your
up.
coffee on your sketch, turn it into something.
Mhm.
Um, but and make sure that when you're uploading, you look at those formatting details, that it's all pixels per inch and it's the right number, because every now and then we'll get a screen that pops up and it's like this blowout of a picture. I mean, we can't grade it because they haven't uploaded it correctly. And so,
Or it's occasionally when kids reduce the size of the file, they make it too small. So
Right.
I always tell my students, go into the College Board, click on the image and look at it and make sure it's not grainy
Right.
when,
That's great
when,
advice. Right.
when it makes big.
If you have a finished product in front of you, it's easier to write. What I want you to write is look at what you are presenting and make sure what you're writing equals what you're presenting.
Right. And
And
read through the writing, because
right.
if the writing, while grammar is not graded in this
Mhm.
portfolio, if you are a reader and you're reading a paragraph and it just is like, oh my goodness, I don't get what they're saying,
Right.
make sure that it's read it out loud and see how
Yes.
it sounds. Pass it off to another teacher and let another teacher
Right.
read it, not for grammar, but for, do they understand what you're trying to say, kind of thing.
Right. I know
Um,
the more people you can have look at it, whether they're artists or not. I mean,
yeah,
if your mom is reading it and doesn't understand what you're trying to say, that's telling you that you have a problem because your
right.
mom's going to tell you.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Well, Janet, thank you so much for joining up with me today. And I hope our conversation has been helpful to everyone.